Hi, I'm Jay Goldman. You're watching Mr. Mobile on butterscotch.com. Today, a look at the Android operating system. Now, some of you may be thinking, operating system, I think I've heard that term before, and in fact, you probably have. The software that runs your computer, so if it's Windows or Mac OS or Linux, is an operating system, and if you have a smartphone like an iPhone or a BlackBerry, it's got an operating system as well, called respectively iPhone OS and BlackBerry OS. Android is a new sort of species in this whole operating system on mobile devices because it's not actually owned by one company. It was started by Google, and a lot of people still call it Google Android, but it's actually now owned by the Open Handset Alliance, which is a group of mobile companies who have sort of teamed up together to make a new operating system for phones that's a lot better than what's been out there in the past from other players than, in fact, RIM and Apple. So you won't see any iPhones running Google Android anytime soon, and it's in fact probably quite unlikely that you'll see any RIM devices, BlackBerries, running it, but you are going to start seeing a lot of other devices as more and more of them come to the market. The phone I'm holding in my hand is an HTC Dream, or as it was known in the US when it came out on T-Mobile, the G1. It's a pretty decent smartphone. It's got a touchscreen on it. It's also got a keyboard, so you can pop it open and type on it. And it runs Google Android. It was in fact the first phone available on the market that ran Android. But you're going to start to see lots of things that aren't necessarily phones popping up. Android has in fact been rumored, or in fact spotted, at some things like big trade shows where people announce these kinds of things, running on stuff like touchscreens that you might use while sitting on your couch and surfing the web. So not necessarily limited to a mobile phone OS. It's a pretty great experience, especially if you use some of Google's other software. So if you have a Google account set up already and you have maybe Gmail for your mail, Google Calendar for your calendaring needs, that kind of stuff, when you set up an Android phone for the first time, it will prompt you to run through a bunch of, it'll prompt you to enter your Google account information, and then it will go and run through a bunch of setup where it actually configures those services for you on the phone. So your Gmail will pop up in the Gmail application and your calendar will be in Calendar. If you use Google applications, that's fantastic. If you don't, it does support things like syncing to some of the other stuff out there that's like Exchange. It's not quite as good as the Google support, so I would say if you're a Google fan and you use the Google apps, you should definitely look at an Android phone. If you're somebody who's in a more corporate environment and you're stuck to an Exchange server, you probably want to think about sticking with your BlackBerry or maybe a Windows smartphone or the new iPhone 3.0 software, which does a much better job of syncing to Exchange. This does, as I said, support touchscreen and keyboard entry. The touchscreen on here is actually really good. There aren't, as far as I know right now, any multi-touch devices using Android, but it is rumored to be coming in some subsequent updates to the software, so you'll be able to do some of the neat things you've seen on the BlackBerry Storm or on the iPhone, where you can sort of get two fingers involved and rotate photos and that kind of stuff. It does have an app store, so following in the footsteps of both RIM. In fact, RIM's app store for BlackBerry or App World for BlackBerry came out after Android did with its marketplace. So you might say that RIM is following in their footsteps. Not as nearly as big as Apple's iPhone App Store, which is definitely the reigning champion as far as that goes. But it is really nice to be able to jump into the App Store on your phone, grab some applications. Right now, in fact, all of Android's apps in the marketplace are free, so you can just jump in there and grab them, but they have talked about providing support for developers who want to charge for applications down the road. You'll find most of the typical sort of things in there, so there's a lot of IM clients, there's some games. You can pretty well outfit your phone to do sort of whatever you'd like, and in fact, the included software is pretty decent. It's got a Maps application, so it's very similar to the Maps application on the iPhone, supported by Google, and it's Google Maps that's running inside of it. It's got a YouTube player if you'd like to watch videos. No Flash supported in the smartphone OS yet, so you can't watch videos from inside of web pages unless they're YouTube videos, in which case they'll launch in the included player and you can watch them in there. Web browsing is actually really good. The browser in here uses WebKit as its rendering engine. So every web browser uses what's called a rendering engine, so it knows how to display what's on the pages. And WebKit is actually an open source rendering engine provided by Apple. It's the basis for Safari on the Mac and Windows platforms, and it's actually the basis for Google Chrome on Windows and maybe on the Mac version when it eventually comes out. So WebKit is the browser of choice in here as well, and that means that you get a really good rendering experience, very similar in fact to what you would see on an iPhone in mobile Safari, but without the multi-touch support. So you can't zoom in on the pages, but you can double tap to zoom in and out. Overall, Android is a very capable operating system. One of the nice things about it is that it's open source, which means that anybody can actually build stuff on top of it. There are no limitations like there are on a closed proprietary system like iPhone OS or on BlackBerry OS. And that means that developers can be a lot more free in the kind of stuff that they're building on the phone. They can do things like background their applications, which you can't do on an iPhone, you can on a BlackBerry. And so there was actually a great competition that Google held when Android was coming out, and the people who won the competition for new Android application had built a carbon footprint calculator if you wanted to measure your carbon impact, and it ran in the background on the phone and used the GPS to determine how far you were traveling and how fast and that kind of thing, and actually goes and calculates your footprint for you. Overall, I would say Android is a great operating system. It's a definite contender in the marketplace. Some of the more exciting hardware that's coming out on it makes it a really realistic choice if you're looking at a smartphone. So you should take a look to see what's out there in the Android world when you are considering a phone upgrade. Again, if you're in the corporate market, may not be your first choice, but if you're an individual user and you like to use your phone for all kinds of different applications, definitely take a look. I'm Jay Goldman. This has been Mr. Mobile. Thanks for watching. Check out some past episodes on butterscotch.com, and we'll catch you next time. This episode brought to you by our friends at Hover, the easiest way to buy domain names and do more with them. Get 25% off today by visiting hover.com/MrMobile.